Do you feel like there's still more things holding back AI's adoption in marketing, or are we lagging behind coding for some reason?
It's actually very true that it's way behind. If you look at customer support, it's a very verifiable loop. Marketing is really difficult, as you mentioned, because of taste. And I think the biggest thing holding it back is the way people have developed marketing AI has been somewhat lazy.
How do you decide what to build versus what to buy?
We basically think like anything that is verticalized for marketers, we should build. We want to be the go-to company that knows how to make XYZ work for marketing. So it's meant to be all of the horizontal stuff we would be willing to buy and all the vertical stuff we would want to build.
Do you see another inflection point coming? And if so, how far away is it? Hey everybody, I'm Paul, founder of BrowserBase, and I'm here on Navigators, our series where we speak with AI leaders navigating the future of what's next with building with AI. AI in marketing is a category I've been really excited about recently because I feel like it actually hasn't fully developed to the same degree as coding and other categories that we all follow every single day. But thankfully, I have an expert here. Kashish is the founder of Hightouch, a leading company in building the AI marketing platform, and we're going to dig in deeper today on how we do this. Thanks for joining me, man.
Thanks for having me.
First of all, thank you for taking the time today. Hightouch has been a journey pre-AI and post-AI. How can you explain what Hightouch does? It's a reverse ETLs for marketing data. It's so much in one. How would you describe Hightouch in one sentence?
It's changed a lot over the years. And Paul, you and I have known each other now for I think like 7 years, but we predominantly do AI for marketers. So anytime a marketer wants to understand which campaign to run, build that campaign with AI, whether it's email or advertising, and actually run that campaign in the wild, we do that for the largest consumer companies. So that's folks like Domino's Pizza, Spotify, and very large media and streaming companies.
In the building blocks to build the AI marketing platform is probably broad. I mean, marketing is the function in my company that buys the most tools, and they have so much software. How do you offer AI for marketing without having to reinvent the whole marketing stack?
Yeah, we honestly had to reinvent the whole marketing stack. And we did it one by one. And so we started with this thing, as you mentioned, that was called reverse ETL, where we help people get their customer data into their different marketing and sales tools. Then we built what we called a customer data platform, and that was basically a self-serve layer for human marketers to actually access that data, do segmentation and journey orchestration. But in the last few years, we've kind of changed how we operate and changed how our customers operate, where now the largest developments are actually in the parts of the platform where agents are able to run your marketing for you. And kind of like what happened is we realized that content was the biggest bottleneck. So if you give marketers the ability to run personalized campaigns, they say, well, I need personalized content to run personalized campaigns. I need a different piece of content for you versus someone else. And they need AI to help them generate like that amount of content. And the biggest problem was hallucination. So if you use any foundation model today and you say, hey, generate on-brand content for me, it will always hallucinate things that don't exist, like the wrong logo, the wrong font. Things will just be a little bit off and it won't be fully on brand. And so the thing that we have like really cracked, it took us about 18 months to do this. It was way harder than we expected. We thought we would get it done in like 6 months, was teaching LLMs how to stay on brand and to build a vector database of context with your actual brand guidelines in embeddings.
Yeah, it almost feels like marketing is one of those industries that really benefits from AI because it is like supply side constrained.
Yeah.
Like you have to hire a number of marketers to create the campaigns and to do individualized, personalized marketing on the most granular level. That's just impossible unless you have a giant army of marketers.
Yep.
And what Hightouch is building is trying to solve that. But you're right, like the big challenges here are around how do I make the content not slop? And
Exactly.
it seems like you guys have really figured it out. Like, what is the secret to making the models actually produce good marketing content and actually keeping that anchored in the brand and the guidelines that you want to have?
Yeah, and so let's define content specifically as image and video. For all intents and purposes, generating text for any consumer brand is pretty solved. And we have RAG. We can basically just look at all the past text you've written and say, great, we'll generate new text for you. Image and video is way harder because let's say I have run like 1 million ads in the past. Let's say I'm a big shoe brand like Nike. Nike's not a customer, so I can talk about them. It's impossible with the context windows today to show an LLM all of the ads I've ever run and say, hey, now generate more ads that look like this. And even if I were to do so, it would still hallucinate because forcing determinisms become really difficult. So we do two things. One is we create a database of all your past advertising, and we turn that into embeddings and tags and teach the LLM how to query against that database. And we do that for each individual brand we work with. So we'll build you what we call like a brand context layer. In that brand context layer would be all the past marketing you've ever done. And we would show the LLM that marketing so it can generate new marketing that looks very similar. Second is we actually use a coding loop rather than a generation, like an image gener loop. So imagine there's a coding agent in the back end, And that coding agent is acting against SVG, which is ultimately a format of like writing code. And those vector images we can edit in a very like Claude Code-like way. And we'll just iterate over that over and over until we get the image just right, where the fonts that are used are actual real fonts. Logos are real logos. The vector images are predominantly real vector images in this brand's database, and then a few generations. So you might do something like, maybe I'm trying to sell a suitcase, and I have different backgrounds for that suitcase. Or maybe I'm trying to sell a shoe, but I want to have an urban version of that shoe or a like sports version of that shoe and like so on. I can change out the background and let the background be generated, but the actual image of the shoe should always be the real image. So that's the kind of challenge. It's basically how do you put real imagery into advertising or into emails, but allow variance through AI. And we actually basically ended up building a canvas that looks like Figma. So if you're a marketer, when you go into Hightouch, you see all your past ads, you see their performances. You have a canvas where you can then generate new ads, and then you can drag and drop or change the text yourself. So that way, instead of kind of prompting back and forth, which is how a lot of AI tools work, some changes you can actually just make manually. And that's what marketers want. They want the ability to do what otherwise they'd have to delegate to these agencies or like brand design teams that are not part of their team.
Yeah, it
And
almost sounds like you've solved the last mile of the creation aspect of it, right? But with all these agentic loops, these coding, it's like continual learning for marketing a little
yep,
bit,
exactly.
where each campaign informs the next one. And
Right.
are you seeing that this must be the type of business that as models get better and as customers use it more, the outputs are getting a lot better? Is that
Exactly.
the case?
Yeah, exactly. And I think there's like two types of companies in the world. There's companies that are scared about models getting better and companies that are excited about models getting better. We are very excited about models getting better. Images 2.0 came out and our performance drastically improved. Last year in 2025, we had the exact same product idea. We went to every single CMO and we said, hey, what if AI was to create your ads? And they said, this doesn't work. We've already tried it. And they were burned by hallucination with all the foundation models. This year, that's completely changed. We have like, I think 15, 20 brands now that predominantly use AI to create all of their ads. Email's coming next.
Yeah, and I'm curious, like people always talk about how models lack creativity,
Hmm.
or there is like a lack of taste in the
Yeah.
models sometimes, and there's even whole evals around model taste.
Yeah.
That's really important for marketing and for the content or the creative campaigns that we put out for our customers. How do you think about giving good taste to models, especially if they might not have them right now?
Yeah, so there's two layers of this. One is translating human taste from like the creative director of the company into some skill that the model can operate on. This is really difficult because that creative director can't often describe what is their brand guideline or like their taste, right? So somehow taking all of their past actual approved content and then translating that into a skill, it's not really a skill, it's more like a vector database, is like task one. Task two is how do we now generate blue sky ideas that are not the exact same as what we've already generated and not the exact same as what some other brand with the same LLM is going to generate too. CMOs ask me this all the time. They say, hey, Kashish, how do I know if I use your product, I won't just generate the exact same stuff as AI is generating for a different brand. I don't want everything to converge into looking the exact same or being the exact same message. And I think it's a really important problem to solve. I think it can be solved through creative prompting and creative loops. So I think like most of the fear that comes from like LLM orchestration comes from the past era, like 6 months ago, where there was no loop. It was a single prompt and a single return. So you're single shotting your image, you're single shotting your video. There's actually not an iterative process. If you do have an iterative process or sub-agents, you can actually always have one sub-agent thinking of blue sky ideas that have never been done before. So we do actually this. We always have one sub-agent, that's our blue sky sub-agent, that's always checking for ideas that this brand has never done before and ideas their competitors have never done before. So we scrape from Facebook all of your competitors' ads. We put that in a separate database, and this Blue Sky agent will always check what have the competitors not done, what's the white space here, what have we not done, what's the white space here, and where might our product offerings differentiate from theirs. So we did a study like this for Puma. Puma's really good at suede. So the agent actually found that Puma wins on suede, and it wins on certain lifestyle brands, not so much in XYZ categories. And so it said, let's generate specifically for this because this is our core advantage, but you haven't done peak before, or you haven't done like urban before. And it would come up with blue sky ideas.
Yeah, there's almost like a really big challenge with models. Like there's a je ne sais quoi of marketing of like what is the taste and what
Yeah,
looks good and what's not, and figuring out what my competitors are doing. Maybe I don't want to do campaigns like that. But it all comes down to the inputs, and the inputs are the ones driven by the
right.
people using the product. And High Touch isn't out to replace marketers; it's
No,
probably augmenting them in quite a bit of ways. How are you teaching people to use this new type of system? People who've done marketing for
Yeah.
decades, probably. I'm sure there's probably a lot of confusion around what should I be using AI for
hmm
in marketing, and you probably see it more than anyone else. Like, what do you tell someone who's getting started with using AI to generate some of their
hmm
campaigns, and what are some of the pitfalls that people see when they're using a product like Hightouch?
Yeah. So marketers are definitely overwhelmed by the amount of AI companies asking them to try their product. My take is this. Like, if you're a marketer, the way we really make the product work is we bring your brand design team and the marketing team into one room. So instead of us saying, hey, marketers can now generate content and you don't need your design team anymore, that's actually not the goal. The goal is, if you have a design team and a marketing team, how can we help those two teams collaborate better and go from maybe we're making like one campaign a week to we can make as many campaigns as we want per day, because we've taken the design team's design etiquette and design language and turned that into a system that the marketing team can then operate on top of. So that's usually the plan. And we forward deploy for this. So we have a forward deployed creative and a forward deployed marketer. One sits with the creative team, one sits with the marketing team, and they both talk to each other to build a system that like is going to make both teams really happy. What we just find is doing any of what I'm describing for a Shopify e-commerce brand is pretty easy. We only do this for large like enterprise brands that have $1 billion revenue or plus. And that's really hard because their teams are usually hundreds of people. They have a lot of sub brands, different geographies, different languages they need to serve. And so it's really about like, how can we take human intelligence or taste and productize it in a way that helps people scale their business, and not just for the sake of it, but rather like in the places where they find really painful. So I'll give you a quick example. Talked to a makeup brand recently, and they told me the marketing team sends design teams like a certain number of briefs a week. We only have the design resources to fulfill 50% of those briefs. The other 50% get thrown away because we just don't have enough designers. That's where AI can really help, because you know for sure that if we had more design resources, whether it's human or agents, that we would be able to serve those briefs. So it's just really clear. And when the product works, you see them really clearly develop more campaigns, and that eventually results in customer experience improving too.
Yeah, there was a cool chart I saw from a venture fund, which was like, where is the enterprise adopting AI right now? And the two categories that were like way far and above was actually customer success and
hmm
coding,
hmm
obviously.
hmm
But I was surprised that like it seems to me that like the use of AI in marketing is probably huge and skyrocketing and growing quite a bit. What are you seeing on the ground? Do you feel like there's still more things holding back AI's adoption in marketing,
Yeah.
or are we lagging behind coding for some reason? What's going to make this business be the number one category
Yeah.
in AI use?
So I think it's actually very true that it's way behind. If you look at customer support, it's a very verifiable loop. I know what my support tickets look like. I know if I've solved them with AI versus the human being. So you can verify the accuracy of the response. Marketing is really difficult, as you mentioned, because of taste. And I think the biggest thing holding it back is the way people have developed marketing AI has been somewhat lazy. Instead of context engineering, doing context engineering to teach the LLM the past marketing, what's working, what's not working, what are the metrics against it, what does my customer data show that's working and not working and customers are buying, instead of building all of these context layers and teaching the LLM how to query against it, it's usually something a lot simpler. Usually it's like, we want to do generations for localization. So take an existing image in English and turn it into Spanish or turn it into French. That kind of stuff, of course, you can make it work, but it's going to be a very small footprint within the actual full marketing. So I think there's a few things that make it really work. One is providing context, and uniquely for each brand. So some people might have their context in a DAM like Adobe, which is like a digital asset management, and that's where your images are stored. Other people might have it in a completely different place. Enterprise really requires you to engineer all the pipelines to bring in context, whether it's customer data, whether it's images, whether it's metrics from your ad platforms, all into one place. So we spent about 12 months building the pipelines to aggregate your ads data, your metrics, aggregate all your content, images, and videos, and aggregate all your assets from your digital asset management solutions in Figma. So if you connect your Figma to Hightouch, we actually index all of the assets in Figma and teach the LLM how to use those assets from Figma. So it's real design assets, not fake ones. And that kind of context engineering work, I think, is really difficult to get right, because how I might do it for Domino's Pizza might be very different from Spotify. Domino's is predominantly showing images of people eating, versus Spotify is often showing images of celebrities or images of the app, right? So like it's just a very different context engineering task. And we have to teach our product first how to create this vector database, and then teach the marketing teams how to adopt it. Those two challenges, I think, just require you to be all in on kind of this hill climbing task of how do I go from 20% hallucination to 1% hallucination, and therefore really earn the marketing team's trust? And that used to take us like 8 weeks. Now it takes us something like 2 days.
Yeah, and the thing that's so surprising to me is that it's not just the generation of assets part of this business that you guys do, but Hightouch started out as pulling in data from one place to another
Yeah.
within your platforms, and like there's so much more around marketing of the logistics of pulling in data, moving it around. I want to go back, what, 3 years, 4 years
Hmm.
now? Because you and I first met, we shared an office for our first company that we used as Hightouch, and for me, it was Stream Club. And you know what? I actually learned a lot about what product market fit means in that moment because we didn't have it and you did. And I could remember seeing at one point the high touch team kept multiplying like mitosis. There's more desks being taken over in
Yeah,
this office.
I
Like
feel bad about
something,
that.
something is working. No, it seemed to work out pretty well. And from there to here, the journey started around a data problem, and
Yep.
now it's the complete marketing
Yep.
solution. Why was the data the first kind of entrant of high touch? Why did you guys tackle that problem first? And maybe walk me through the journey of how this company's grown across
Yeah.
a very challenging engineering problem into now a much more complete solution that serves even a bigger purpose.
Yeah. So data was our first platform, and it is the foundation of good marketing. Like if you talk to any CMO, they'll say, Paul, I have so much customer data about my customer. I use this tiny amount of it to actually personalize their customer experience in their marketing. If I could use more of the data to personalize customer experience, I think I would make more money. This is like the number one thing marketers tell us. And so the very first thing we built was a data platform for marketers where they had all this customer data. It would help them self-serve, do analytics and audiencing and journey orchestration on that data. It sounds really simple, but in enterprise, this actually ends up being really difficult because usually in enterprise, you have way more data than you can actually use. And so that was the first platform. It was the most like pinpointed like pain that we could solve. So while everyone was saying, I'll give you better personalization, I'll give you better marketing, we were the only ones saying, I'll help you access the data you already have. And we specifically like pioneered this thing that we call composable. The idea was bring your own database. So you're a large brand like Domino's. Instead of me building you a database of customer insights, I'll just plug into yours. I'll be fully serverless. On day one, I'll have access to all your data. And now your marketers will therefore have access to all your data. And as you improve your own database, the marketing database will improve too. So the serverless composable concept was what we pioneered. That's what made the product popular, and that's what got us to like past 100 million of ARR now. It's this idea of bring your own database. Bring your own database, by the way, only makes sense in enterprise. SMBs don't have their own database to bring. So it forced us to be an enterprise-led company rather than an SMB or like mid-market company. And that, I think, was just like truly differentiating. There's so many solutions in the market that say, I want to store your data. Every CRM, every SaaS tool says, I'll be your database. And we were the singular SaaS tool that says, I'll never be your database. In fact, if you revoke access, I have nothing. I'll even store my error logs, my diffs, everything in your like VPC. So this is what made us popular. And upon solving that problem, pre-AI, like where we kind of like heard the most pain from marketers after that point was, now you've given me access to this data, I don't know what to do with it. Can you help me figure out which campaigns to run or which customers are underserved, which customers are getting too many emails, et cetera? And so we tried to build it, but pre-LLM is impossible. Post-LLM, now we have 24/7 research agents that can actually check and say like, hey, these customers haven't received an email in a long time, or hey, you have no content to serve customers above 50 years old. LLMs with their unlimited analytics capabilities are literally surfacing ideas to marketers on a daily basis. And so now the vision's changed dramatically, right? First it was access. Now it's, what if you, as a marketer or business person, could wake up every morning and the agent said, hey, Paul, here's your top 5 opportunities. I think you can make more money by marketing people that are in Wisconsin between the ages of 25 to 30 with these products, because we know that they're interested in these products. And you had these 5 tickets in the morning, and you said yes and no to each of those. And based on that, what would need to happen next is content. And that's why we ended up building content, because we found that like this data problem was the number one problem, but upon solving it, people needed the content to execute against the ideas.
Yeah, and the really convenient part of the solving the data problem first is it also solves the context part of being able
Right,
to feed in the data to a model to generate the right assets. So
exactly.
the sequencing kind of was that luck or skill, do you think, to start with the data problem and then back into marketing? Was the goal always to get into marketing longer term, like holistically? Or was it more of a kind of a gradual discovery
No,
that you were very well positioned for this?
it was gradual. That's a great question. If you had asked me, Tejas, or Josh, my co-founders, 2 years ago, did we think we would do content generation or have a Figma like Canvas? Absolutely not. Like 0% chance. Even like pre-Opus 4.5, you would have asked the same question and we would have said no. It's really like these iterative loops and the improvement of image generation that made us believe in our own ability to execute against this. Yeah, we always served marketing teams, but it was always in a very like point and click and very execution type way. Like you declare to me like a very declarative UI. You tell me you want to run this campaign, I'll for sure run it for you. But it was not very intelligent. Pre-LLM, there was no part of Hightouch that would suggest to you how to improve your marketing or how to improve your customer experience.
The thing I've learned about startups so far is it's always been as you grow as a company, you're going to have that earned secret that
Yeah.
you can see the market or the asks from the customers that you never have seen before. People want to use your product in the wrong ways, and that's often the best inspiration for driving the product forward. This company started what, 2020, 2021,
Yep,
I
2020.
imagine. Yep. And that has probably changed a lot because you've gone through COVID, you've
Mm-hmm.
gone through AI. How
Mm-hmm.
has building High Touch itself, the business, changed for you over the past 5 years, especially as everyone has become more AI native?
Yeah.
Does High Touch use High Touch? Are you
Yeah.
running your own campaigns? That's
Yeah.
cool. Tell me more
So
about that.
yeah, so I mean, I think the biggest improvement obviously is like just Cloud Code. With coding agents and Cloud Cowork, like everyone in the company has access to just way more information way more quickly. Previously, they would ask like me or like one of like our like more tenured staff, like, hey, like how does this product work? Now, because of GitHub MCP and Claude, everyone can just say like, how does this product work? And then you get a response with Claude reading the actual code base and saying, here's how the product actually works. So our solution engineers no longer need to ask engineering when they have questions about product, which is pretty crazy. Building the company, honestly, has just become more fun. We went from right like a very like top-down enterprise sale and a very hard infosec, very like kind of like foundational sale where we're selling a data product to consumer marketing teams, to now like something that's much more fun. Ads teams, if you can help them get 5% better performance on their ads, that's probably $50 million or at least $5 million for them. This kind of stuff is just much more exciting. And the challenges are like totally greenfield. You asked like, why do we think marketing AI is not working? It's because no one has invested in like making it work. Building that context database is just like really difficult. Teaching an LLM how to query your actual first-party customer data in your own database with your own semantic layer is just really hard because every company is heterogeneous. You might use Databricks, I might use Snowflake, and we might have a very different model of like how we model our data. So teaching an LLM how to write good SQL queries actually is the first thing that we ever built at Hightouch, but it was for like a point-and-click UI. So translating that to agents was like the most natural extension. That is, I think, where luck happened. If like there's like probably like 50 tools right now that want to write correct SQL queries against a database. They're all missing the semantic layer. If they had a good semantic layer, they would be able to write those queries. We built a good semantic layer in 2020, and we have over 600 customers that have adopted that semantic layer. And so there's just like small advantages that we could not have predicted that actually make our insights and data agents better than anyone else's, and then make it easier for us to then link up that first-party data with images and videos and other things. It's like if we had just built the image and video piece, it would be missing all that customer context that we kind of get for free by building our core platform.
And for companies that start now,
Mhm.
thinking about what is my data mode? What
Yeah,
types of data am I collecting? How could they maybe be useful in the future? And that seems like the biggest decision that you need to make as a company to be ready in a
right,
context heavy and AI driven world.
right.
Is there a point where your data wasn't working for the company and you had to kind of think backwards holistically around how do I think about what data we need to build great products? How has your data strategy been at High Touch over the past 5 years? How's it
Yeah.
changed?
Ours is, I guess, a really odd because we just plan to have no data strategy for iTouch. Like, so what I mean by this is we want to help every brand we work with their data strategy. And so we'll help them develop like semantic layer, insights, a brand context layer, all their metrics for their ads. We'll help them develop like kind of the data layers for each of these things, and we write it back to them. So how I develop it for like a B2C brand is very different from a marketplace brand. So we work with like the largest food delivery app. Their context that we built is pretty different from like Domino's Pizza, right? And the plan is basically win by helping brands develop their own data strategy versus us owning the data.
Mm.
And so with that being said, like our belief is that there's so much value and thickness. We basically refer to like advantages and like moats as thickness versus thinness.
Mhm.
If you have a thin advantage, it can just go away tomorrow because someone builds it for free. If you have thick advantage, it's just really hard to build. We think there's a lot of thickness in helping any consumer brand develop this like insights layer and context layer. And there's actually so much code that needs to be written to develop that context and like write the scripts to tag your emails. For example, talked to a company that said, we have 10 years of email history, but we have no idea what those emails said because we sell millions of products. So how do I know what email Paul received? All I know is the campaign name and the HTML. With LLMs, I could actually have the LLM render every single one of the HTMLs, look at it, and say, oh, we tried to sell Paul a fridge. We tried to sell Paul a dishwasher. They're a home improvement brand. So that's like the kinds of stuff they sell. And then they could then tag all those emails with, here's the stuff that we showed Paul. They look at the first party customer data. They see, actually, Paul did eventually buy a fridge. We didn't realize that the email worked. But now that we have LLM tagging, we can like make this assumption. Hightouch has provided the code to tag the email, to link these two things together, and then the research agent to actually cross-reference these two things. So there's so much thickness in the insights layer that we don't think we need to own the data layer. And we own it by kind of like creating it rather than storing it.
Earlier, you said that running Hightouch has become so much more fun at this scale, the
Yeah.
business at this time. What's made it fun for you, and how has your day-to-day changed over the past year, especially as AI models have changed a lot about how we work every single day?
Yeah. It's allowed like all of me, Tejas, and Josh to get much closer to code. So like whenever we launch a new product or whenever we're working on something, I can follow the PRs really easily. And on a weekly basis, I can just have Claude summarize for me, like what are the PRs this week? What do people work on? How does it compare to like, what they said they would work on in stand-up? And like, what is the priorities like for the next week? Like you just get so much information from like the commits in GitHub and the PRs and cross-reference with Notion. It's like really that simple. For like a few weeks this year, I was just coding. And like it made me get closer to the code base and realize like where we have these advantages, for example, because I like to like just know, do we think we have an advantage and a moat and like a value that we're adding in the pipeline, or is it actually kind of made up? And then you find all these areas where you're like, yeah, there's a real advantage here, or there's some sub-optimization here that we've made that will make better over time. And so it allows us to be closer to code, allows us to ship more things. So we have basically teams with like 1 to 5 engineers, no PM, that can ship entire products. And those entire products might be like $1 billion like market that some other company has built around for the last 30 years. So the ability to go multi-product, the ability to like track out what these projects are working on, and just get products faster into customers' hands. Like when I said we built the Figma integration that indexes all your assets from Figma, I think it took us less than a week. And previously, that would have taken us probably a month. And like I personally use OpenClaw now. So I have it running on my own machine at home, and it has read access to all my work APIs. So it has read access to my email, my calendar, my Whoop data, and it gives me like so much information on like what is happening in the company, and just constantly like builds these databases of like people in my life and like things I need to follow up on. And I haven't given it access to Granola yet, but once it gets Granola access, like I have friends that will have OpenClaw summarize all the things that you were supposed to follow up on this week but didn't follow up on. So it's just like a more automated way to live life.
If marketing agents are really driven by the amount of data they have, I'm curious about what data do you wish you could have in the
Yep.
Hightouch platform, and maybe which actions you wish an agent can take that it can't take yet. It
Yeah.
seems like right now everything is within its own world, but I imagine there's things that you'd want your agent to do that it can't do yet. Tell me a little bit more about that.
Yeah. So the scope is literally unlimited because there's so much consumer signal in social media, in weather, in like world events, et cetera, right? So you talk to CMOs and they say, look, I know how to plan for 4th of July. 4th of July comes every year. I can plan for it 6 months in advance. I can create the content around it. But how do I plan for the US losing the World Cup last night? How do I plan for like the storm that happened where everything in like New York and upstate like completely froze and all the pipes were frozen? How do I plan for world events that are truly like marketing just in time for like a consumer experience that makes sense, right? Like that's the kind of thing that marketers would wish for. For that, they need the signals and the consumer data, which they don't have. And the only way to do that is some sort of browser use or some sort of like scraping. And so we do some of this today, but there's, I think, like literally unlimited amounts that we could do. There was this thing called social listening that became popular in the last 10 years. And it was basically like companies would scrape your brand's Twitter and Facebook and Instagram, whatever, like all these things, and then give you that data and say, here's now like your consumer sentiment. And now you can do your marketing based on this. Well, LLM should be able to do that like for free, in theory, but orchestrating it and having it scrape and like use browser use is difficult. So this is something that we have been working on and trying to give consumers signal on. So we help people basically build listeners. The listener will be like some check Twitter, check Instagram, check the weather, check my database for like different SKUs that are popular versus not. And it will come bring that insight back in the format of a report to the marketer. And then it'll give you ideas for, based on these signals, I think you should try XYZ. So a fast food brand will be like, scrape all my competitors' Instagrams or like Twitters and figure out like funny stuff that I could do. And then it'll just generate ideas. So like the scope of like what we as a startup do and what marketers can do as a single marketer just blows up, right? Because now I, as a single marketer, could run a social media program, plus an advertising program, plus an email program with this like listening insights layer. That's the vision. The vision is to create this kind of like, with your marketing team, empower those people to do the things they've always wanted to do. And I think it's really hard because let's say I accomplish this stuff I just told you, you now need to store all that browser context and like scraping context in some format. And as soon as you do it regularly, it's gonna now blow up the context window, has to be queryable. It's way more interesting to do it in a time series way. If I scrape your competitors' ads week over week, by looking at which ads they still have active, I can actually tell you which ads are working because they wouldn't have those ads active if it wasn't working. So now I need to store it in a time series way as pages and ask the LLM to query like over some horizon what is popular or not popular. So it's just like, it's almost like we now have like unlimited ability to write code, sure, but we need like way better systems and like system design to actually query against all of this like vast amount of data that like synthetic data that we can generate.
Yeah, there's so much that you can build within the Hightouch product that you've already built, by the way.
Yeah.
The scope is massive. How do you decide what to build versus what to buy? And what's your strategy of picking a vendor that you trust? And maybe that even applies to models as well.
Yeah.
I'm sure you're constantly switching models and changing things. There must be some sort of strategy behind that. I'm curious to hear more.
Yeah. So I mean, we basically think like anything that is verticalized for marketers, we should build. We want to be the go-to company that knows how to make XYZ work for marketing, whether it's browser agents, LLMs, like generation. For example, for generation, we don't just use one foundation model. We use like several as well as some open source ones because different models are good for different things. So you trust us to be the arbitration, but you trust Higgsfield or like OpenAI to be good at images. And so it's meant to be all of the horizontal stuff we would be willing to buy and all the vertical stuff we would want to build. That's the thought process.
And what do you look for when you're trying to evaluate a vendor? If you're thinking about, hey, I'm putting something in the critical path, and you and I know when you
Yeah.
work with a provider, and that might be a model, might be infrastructure, if it goes down, you go down. What's kind of the stuff that you do to evaluate the types of AI companies you want to partner with as you build Hightouch?
Yeah, I mean, usually, like, ideally, they would have supported a scale that's larger than ours. Our product is luckily still ultimately either agents pinging the API or marketers pinging the API, so the volume is like reasonable. And so we just want to make sure it's like scalable and like resilient enough so that when we have these spiky events, like let's say someone says, build me a model of all World Cup wins and content against each possible win. So I have all this like cross product of like possible wins, right? That's like a really reasonable use case. We should be able to support the throughput at that time. So it's really just scalability, reliability, pretty basic software stuff. I actually basically expect that any company that plans to be around for at least the next few years will have these things. And so we mostly evaluate like how long do we think this company will be around. With evaluating startups, that's the concern, that if you work with someone that is gonna build for 2026 but then pivot in 2027, then it doesn't make sense. And that's why we would work with someone like browser-based, because we know that like you guys will continue to build for browsers, for search, for like the kinds of like platforms that you're in right now.
Yeah, Kareem from Ramp told me one time that the way they evaluate vendors is like, hey, if we buy this thing now, will it cost us more in a year because the company gets better? Like
Oh,
sometimes
interesting.
buying from startups, their product is going to get much better tomorrow and the
Huh.
next day, right? And you can imagine that buying from a startup is almost like an angel investment.
Huh.
Getting in there early, if this product is going to be the best product in the market now, but also 10x better in the next year, I think it's really cool to think about how sometimes it is worth in high alpha to
Huh.
buy from the fast moving startup because you might be the customer that's getting the right attention and hopefully getting some advantage that another competitor doesn't have.
Interesting.
I want to go back to the beginning of our conversation. We talked about how, there was this chart showing that coding and customer support are the
Yep.
top categories and marketing's emerging. Hightouch has had a series of inflection points over the last 5 years. Do you see another inflection point coming? And if so, how far away is it?
Oh, great question. I think so. I think like Images 2.0 honestly was a very serious inflection point. Like Images 2.0 for images and then CDance for video already made a very large impact. I think like instruction following improving will massively help because we can force more determinism. Image and improving will massively help because we can enforce more just like images that look real. And good image gen is actually often the precursor to good video gen, because you want to provide frames to the video generation to like as reference images, right? So I think both of these two changes will make Hightouch much better in 2027 and AI marketing much better in 2027. So like basically how we view the world is content generation should increase with some like slope, and then insights like SQL generation basically should increase with some slope. The thing that we believe is limiting SQL generation is actually not coding agents, it's just semantic layers and semantic understanding, catalogs, etc. The thing that's limiting image and video is actually truly the foundation model. So we're kind of like patiently waiting for the models to get much better for image and video, and we see that happening like pretty regularly. And then for data, we're like really just grinding to solve the problem ourselves because we feel like we have everything we need.
Well, Kashish, I'm really hyped for 2027 for Hightouch. The inflection point that I see on the horizon, I think you and I both see that for this company. It's gonna be really fun to come back 1 year from now and we can look at these predictions and see how much of it came true. But so far, you've been pretty accurate in the last 5 years of
Mhm.
predicting what happens next. I'm pretty confident next year's gonna be great too. So congrats on all the success so far, and thank you for joining us today. We're really happy to have you.
Yeah, thank you for coming. That's great.